Awesome. So I'm so excited to talk to you about Fair Play. I saw this at Sundance, and I knew there would be a lot of conversation and dialogue about it when it was released. And I was wondering, what's it been like for you to be mining through the reactions to it?
I mean, thrilling, it's I think that that's everything you want as a filmmaker is for people to feel what you intended them to feel. And I think, for me, it was like I'm a filmmaker who believes like it's especially these days when we're so oversaturated with so many films, and really there's a lot of great quality films out there, and especially coming like this year. But like I just feel like it's not enough to just make a good movie. Like there I see good movies and I'm just like they're not necessarily films that I'm going to think about like 5 minutes later. So for me, like I killed myself trying, setting out to make a film that would start conversation, that would start debate over, the subject matters that I think are not talked about. And that's why I set out to make, this film, to show how much hold these ingrained power dynamics still have over us, in a post Me Too world. And so it's just been incredibly exciting to see op-eds written about the subject matter, and yeah, random people just tweeting about it and talking about it and arguing about it too. Couples arguing about it. Like that was what was, it's been exciting, is to see, you start to see couples be like, oh, that's what you thought. And then it's like, that there's going to be an interesting car ride home. But yeah.
Yeah, totally. How did the idea for this film come? Like, what was the, writing process like? Where did this idea come from?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that was compounding, I would say, inside me for years. And I think became more and more obvious to me the more that I was experiencing these kinds of dynamics in my personal life. And but I think like the kind of real kernel came when my career started to take off in the commercial world, kind of after school, and then my rise in television. And it was just this feeling where I would get certain job opportunities, and my first reaction after time and time again, like, it wasn't excitement, it was fear. And it was fear that my, success might cost me my relationship, because there was this tension, but I will say it was unspoken tension, and this unspoken feeling that me being big on some level made the men that I was with feel small. And it just made me realize that even in a post Me Too world, it's like a man's success is always a win for the relationship, but when it's the other way around, why is it a threat? And it just got to this point, like, in my life where I was experiencing this over and over again, and it was something that I was afraid to talk about or afraid to confront, because I didn't want to admit that that's what was going on. I'm a strong, independent woman. I don't want to admit that I'm, minimizing myself or undermining myself to protect, the male ego, but I was. And it was something that I was not only afraid to talk about, but afraid to admit to myself. And that's why I made this movie.
Wow, that's amazing. I love your writing and direction with this film, and I was thinking about how by having control of, like, you wrote the script, by having control with the direction, what did you want to protect in the script that other directors might do differently? Like, was there something specific that you were
Yeah.
concerned about that you wanted to be able to have that control over?
Um, I think that there is definitely a version that of this film in other filmmakers' hands that it would have been much more black and white. And where Emily would have been, much more stereotypically a victim, or victimized in a way that we've seen before, where the ending would have just been her being a victim, where she doesn't retaliate in any way. And because I think it makes people uncomfortable when when women kind of, strike back. But and then on the other hand of it, I think that I could have, in another filmmaker's hands, I think they would have maybe villainized Luke much earlier on in the film than what had happened, or it just would have again been a little more black and white. And what I was interested in, in really peppering into the script, and protecting that with the performances and protecting that with the execution of the direction and the edit, and what we were showing and not showing, was, Luke's struggle and Luke's pain, and kind of empathizing with him in those moments of struggle and pain, even though we know that it's not okay. Do you know what I mean? And I think that and that's what has made people uncomfortable, but also that's what has made them compelled to the film, is that you do empathize with Luke, and in moments where you also don't necessarily like him. And that was something that I really wanted to protect, at all costs, because I was trying to show that, Luke represents many generation of men caught in the middle between adhering to a modern feminist society, but still having been raised on traditional ideas of masculinity, and I wanted to show that Luke is a man who, on the one hand, adores Emily because she's intelligent, adores her because, she's a killer. He adores her for the very same things that he's also threatened by, and that's what makes it complex, and that's what makes him human. But those feelings themselves don't make him a bad guy. That's not his fault. This is the way that he was raised. This is the way that society raises most boys, is to believe that masculinity is an identity, teaches them that their self-worth is based on how much they achieve. It teaches them that success is a zero-sum game. And so it's like, how can we expect him to kind of, rise above that if he's been wired a certain way? So while on the one hand, it's like, I personally, as the writer, when writing the script, didn't blame Luke for having those feelings. Obviously, I blame him for what I still say. I'm very clear, like, it's not okay that he then weaponizes his pain and weaponizes his insecurity, against her. And that's the cautionary tale that I wanted to, show, is that, okay, the feelings themselves don't make him a villain, but what he does with those feelings, end up, yes, villainizing him, because it's not okay, and because this is what, in my experience, certain men have done when they feel insecure, when they feel inferior, and they're not always equipped to deal with it in the healthiest ways, because there's never been a platform for men to express themselves. But yeah, that was really important to me. It was just leaning into the gray at times, and leaning into the complexity of that struggle, and the struggle between wanting to love someone and also wanting to hurt them at the same time. So
That's fascinating. What I love about the film is the idea that if Luke gets the promotion over Emily, it's an entirely different movie. I mean, maybe it's just a straight romance where they get married and live happily ever after. Do
yeah.
you believe that? Do you think that if he's promoted, none of this happens?
Oh, absolutely. I believe and I said that to them on set. I said there's, if he had continued to succeed one step ahead of her, for they would have had a great relationship, because like, she would have been fine with it, because it's not something that women are threatened. Women, success, when a man succeeds, it's not a threat to them in any way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's good for the relationship. It's like, okay, we have more money. Like, why would that be a bad thing? However, when a woman succeeds over a man, it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Now it's a threat. Now it's like, there's all sorts of, potential problems for where that can go. But yeah, I totally believe that they continue to have a great relationship if he had just, been one step ahead of her, which is, sad.
Which is also terrifying too, that, this person is capable of such bad thing, like, that she
Mhm.
loves, that she didn't know he's capable of such. I mean, what he does is, I'm gonna ask you about a point of no return for that character. But but yeah, it's a horror film almost too.
Yes.
Um, but I want to know, how much does the stockbroker industry play a part in this cutthroat dynamic? Did you debate, like, having them in a different industry, or did you know that when you were writing this, they're going to be stockbrokers?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mapped out the relationship drama first. So I mapped that out, like, the idea, and I just kept it kind of vague when I first started outlining the film. I just was like, okay, a woman gets promoted instead of her partner after they get engaged. How would that implode? You know, what are the ways in which that would unravel? And once I felt like I had a good grasp on where that could go, then I was looking for a backdrop to set it against. And yeah, I mean, I considered a few different industries, but ultimately I landed on finance pretty quickly because I just felt like I mean, for a number of reasons. I felt like the high stakes nature was just going to be exciting to write and exciting to watch. I also felt like it was actually a world that I could emotionally tap into and relate to, even though I knew nothing about finance. I'd never worked in finance, but I do feel like my rise in television was somewhat similar, just in the sense that like there's a lot of money on the table, you know, when you're shooting any given day. And if you don't make your days, you know, the amount of money that you cost a production, and that you can be a hero on one day, you know, directing, you know, on a show when you make your day, and then the next day and everyone, you know, is talking about how great you are, and then the next day it's like you don't make your day and suddenly you risk never being called back. And it's like how it can fluctuate so quickly between being on top and being on bottom, I thought was something that's very similar to the finance world. You know, one day you can make the company firm millions of dollars, and the next day you could lose, you know, 3 times what you made them. And talking to those guys, it's like what fluctuating, you know, between the emotional highs and the emotional lows does to a person, does to your psyche, and then how that toxic kind of those toxic ups and downs feeds into the toxicity of an unraveling relationship. I thought that's what's interesting is how it all becomes this kind of toxic bubble, that and then this vicious cycle that just becomes impossible to escape.
That's a really interesting correlation. I really like that. So the film, I think the point of no return for the couple takes place in the bathroom.
Yep.
Um, what was it like writing that scene? And did you know it was going, when did you know it was going to go there?
Mm-hmm. Um, so yeah, I mean, I knew where it was going to end and where it was going to go before I actually knew where it was going to start. um,
Wow.
yeah, because you know, sexual assault isn't, when you boil down, you know, what sexual assault is, it's not really about sex. It's really about power. And I set out to make a thriller about power dynamics between men and women on the ugliest level. So for me, it always had to escalate to that place where the only way Luke can reclaim the power from Emily is through physical dominance. You know, that's the only way that he can take it back from her. He can't beat her in the office. You know, he can't, like, that is the only way for him to feel like he has something over her in this really horrific, ugly, brutal way. So for me, like, it always had to escalate to that place. And then because it goes to that place, for me, and the last scene is about what Emily, you know, does to reclaim the power that he took away from her when he sexually and violently assaults her. And unfortunately, she has to use the same physical force that he used against her, because this is a man who refuses to be, you know, to face accountability in any single way. Like, she tries to use her words, but we've seen him, like, the whole, like, all the pain and destruction that he causes, not just her, but also himself over the course of the film, is because this is a man who can't face his own failures and can't face his own weakness. And, you know, I think what really triggers her fury to picking up the knife in the end is the fact that after sexually assaulting her, after, you know, barking like a dog in the office, after, you know, all this uh emotional and verbal abuse, is that he's acting like everything's normal, like none of it happened. And he's there saying, yeah, the bookshelf is yours and the coffee table is mine. And, you know, and I think that's what triggers, like, that final fury and that final rage of injustice, you know. And ultimately, I do think, though, like, the violence is really just a means to get him to finally submit, you know, and to get on his knees and submit to his own inferiority, you know, which is something that he's been running from. Because ultimately, you know, this is really, more than anything, a film about male fragility. So it needed to go to the, you know, the ugly places that it needed to go to in the bathroom, but ultimately end in the place where he just submits submits to it, you know, in a way that I think that's the real resolution of the film.
Wow. One final question. So a lot of discussion online about erotic thrillers and how this is a throwback to the erotic thrillers of the late 80s and early 90s. And I was
Hmm.
wondering, do you view this as an erotic thriller? Or were you thinking about that even when you were writing it and directing it, of course?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I set out to make a thriller, I would say, about power dynamics between men and women, which happens to have crossovers to the erotic thriller genre. You know, definitely crossovers there. It is also a highly sexual film, you know, given the sexual nature of it as well, and the violence, you know, and also the subject matter, you know, in terms of, you know, a relationship kind of imploding and you know and a couple kind of turning, you know, their trust in one another. So I do feel like there's many crossovers to the erotic thriller genre. I never set out to make an erotic thriller, and for me, like, I just feel like as a new filmmaker, I'm not really interested in making a film that stays within the confines of one particular genre. You know, for me, I think like it's our jobs to twist genre and manipulate it, you know, and kind of flip it on its head, and to some degree to tell new stories, you know, and to serve as stories that have to be told right now. And so yeah, that was always my intention, was to kind of just break genre a little bit, while still using the tropes at times to shine a light on an emotional terror, you know, that I feel like has been quite normalized in our society, you know, and also to show all the ways in which women are forced to play ugly to survive. You know, how can the genre speak to the themes that I wanted to explore? I think that was more the bigger question for me. And that's what really drove me to telling it through the lens of what I just call a thriller.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you for a wonderful
Yeah.
conversation.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.